Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Friday, December 1st, 2023. My personal friend and good friend of the show, Jack Devine, returns to our cameras today. Jack, it's always a pleasure, my dear friend. Thank you for coming back on the show.
Same here, Josh.
How, from your perspective, with all of your years of experience in the intelligence community, how do things look now, today, early December 2023, in Ukraine?
Well, I think, we've been tracking this together for a long time. I think we're at that stalemate. You have the winter coming in. It's in, actually. Both forces are going to try and dig in. The Ukrainians do seem to be arranging dust-ups inside the Soviet Union, but I'm not expecting, and I haven't been expecting, certainly in the last several interviews we've done, any big breakthrough on either side. I did notice today that Putin called up another, I think, 170,000 troops. So now he's going to be up to 1,000,003. Makes you wonder why you need 1,000,003 soldiers to handle Ukraine. But whatever it is, he has to raise more troops. And, I don't think it's going to make a bit of difference. But I don't think we're going to see much for a while, Judge.
You have
There might be one spectacular thing here or there, but I think you're looking at a, lack of a better word, stalemate.
Well, Jack, to be fair to you, you have predicted a stalemate. You predicted it a long time that we would reach a stalemate. Is this the stalemate you predicted? Because Putin still has control over Crimea and the eastern part, those parts of Ukraine that he claims are really Russia.
Yeah, I think this is about where the line is, but I wouldn't be surprised when the snow melts. He gives it another try. But I think we're close. I've always said 2024, we'd probably see a wind down on both sides. That's not what's going to happen for the foreseeable few months. But if he doesn't make a big push, I assume that's why he's calling up more troops. He has a hard time recruiting people, a really difficult time, because the young men there know what it's like to be on that battlefront. There's enough information out that you don't want to rush to the battle. And they also know it's not mother Russia at risk. I mean, no matter what he says. And there's even little groups of mothers now coming out saying, "You bring the boys home." So it's going to be a tough sled, but I think this is close to the stalemate. If it's not, let's give it an arbitrary date, and you can hold it to me May 1st, right? If this isn't it, we'll probably see another run at Ukraine, and it won't make a difference. It won't move it either way. I don't expect the Ukrainians to regain Donbass. I don't expect him to lose it. They just wind down. As I mentioned a couple times on the show, we're still at war with North Korea, so you can wind down and still have a state of war.
All right. So since we have spoken last about Ukraine, President Zelensky and his chief general, General Zaluzhny, have publicly feuded with each other because General Zaluzhny said to The Economist magazine about 3 or 4 weeks ago it was a stalemate. President Zelensky didn't like that. President Zelensky's chief of staff was assassinated in his home. The Ukrainians have imposed a draft of age 17 to age 70 of both genders. President Zelensky has closed the borders, so draft age people, which is almost everybody, can't leave. And President Zelensky canceled the elections in 2024.
Yeah, so I think
that can't look very good for Ukraine, can it? All those things taken together.
I think we've said all along, and one of Putin's strong views, which has merit, is that the Ukrainians have a limited population. I mean, it's still quite large, but it's manpower is an issue on both sides. Putin has trouble recruiting them, and the Ukrainians just have the numerical problem that there's not enough men. So I'm not surprised. I mean, this is a grinding war, but I'd still rather be on the Ukrainian side. I can see why Zelensky doesn't want to say a stalemate. You're head of state. You want to be able to say, we're making progress. And I've been saying all along, people should have at the outset said, look, if we can hold a 2.2 million uh, uh, armed forces at bay for 22 months, that has to be viewed as some sort of victory in somebody's book. I mean, who would have dreamed that? I mean, really, who would have said for 22 months you would have held off the great quote unquote Russian army? If now it's now 2.2. I don't want to exaggerate. It's being increased as of today.
Can Putin just declare victory and go home since he has Donbass and Crimea secured?
Yeah, I think he may have to, Judge. I think he peddles propaganda that you and I would think, well, of course, the people don't know it's not Nazis in Europe and that it's not NATO trying to, but it sells in his neighborhood. So I think he can go back and sell it. But the people in the know, what I'm not worried for him is he going to lose the election? Is there going to be a popular uprising in the street? What I've been saying all along is that you're probably going to see some version of a palace coup where power brokers inside of Russia decide he's a liability and this thing is dragging on way too long. It's time for him to retire.
Here's Secretary of State Blinken 2 days ago in Brussels after a meeting with NATO foreign ministers. I'd like you to evaluate this with brutal candor, Jack, because I don't think it's credible, but you listen and give me your view. It's not very long.
First, we focused on NATO's enduring support and commitment to Ukraine. And I have to tell you, listening to all of our colleagues around the table, every single one expressed strong, enduring support for Ukraine. Some are questioning whether the United States and other NATO allies should continue to stand with Ukraine as we enter the second winter of Putin's brutality. But the answer here today at NATO is clear and it's unwavering. We must and we will continue to support Ukraine.
Given the short attention span Americans have, and given their priority on Israel and Hamas, is what Secretary Blinken said truthful and realistic?
The first part that I think is absolutely true is NATO, to my surprise at the very beginning, have been steadfast in supporting Ukraine. Why? They actually understand Russian aggression in Europe, and they do not want Putin to expand his span of control. So I think the Europeans are in for a long haul. What I worry about is our own domestic political situation.
Right.
I mean, there's elements in Congress, and someone pointed this out to me the other day. I'm a Cold Warrior. I've been around a long time. I've seen this act before, whole generation, but there's so many young people, anyone under 50, right, probably has no idea what the Cold War was about. They're not even sure about what World War II is or where Ukraine is. It's just another country. So I think there is this growing divide about why are we in Ukraine, and the longer it goes on. However, this is Jack's best call, and your folks will love this because it relates to the deep state. And so in Washington,
my folks are your folks. Go ahead.
You have, let me include myself in there. Let's save the mystery from everybody. So my point is, there are people that are professionally in foreign policy in both parties and think tanks that work these problems. This is how they live. This is what they love. And I think in that, and when you look at Congress, it's reflected in there that there's a large segment of that group that understand the problem, so that I think the congressional support will remain there. It's unfortunate that the way it looks now, it allows Putin to think that there's more hope than he thinks there is. He's also hoping Donald Trump wins the election and somehow that cuts another deal. I want to announce early, if should that happen, Donald Trump is elected, I still believe our policy will be very strong on Ukraine. Now, his partners may disagree. So I'm not even expecting it, but Putin believes that. I believe he believes that. He believes we're weak and that we'll get wobbly knees. And it's the reason I write a couple of the op-eds saying, don't get wobbly knees. This is bigger than Russia and Ukraine.
Switching gears to the other hotspot, which is, of course, Israel and Hamas. The New York Times reported last night that Israeli intelligence had compiled a 40-page report showing the preparation for the October 7th invasion, showing the likely 60 places where Hamas would breach the security wall between Israel and Gaza. And it turned out they were the same 60 that were breached. And they had this report a year ago, and the Netanyahu administration did not take it seriously. At the same time, let me finish. You can roll all this in, Jack.
But I would just say, I think the New York Times article sounds credible to me. That that's such a, I think, but it sounds to me like a single report. In other words, here's the plan. And when they received the plan, they didn't have a time frame for it. And their own assessment was they don't have the capability to do this. Okay.
Well, that was an erroneous assessment.
It isn't. Let me just bear with me 1 second, because I've been in this thing a dozen times where government officials present a paper, go away, a crisis comes, they dig through the archives, find it, and say, see, we told you.
Right.
There wasn't enough juice on the line when they got that report. What are we going to do about it? Who's going to do what? Where? That isn't, and I think this will play out. There's going to be an investigation, and I think a serious one by the Israelis. Let me come to my point, though.
Okay.
My point in that op-ed that I wrote right after the invasion is they didn't have human sources. They had a source that provided them a report a year ago. What happened in those 365 days in human source reporting? Do you know the answer to that?
I don't.
No. Well, there is no answer. And that is, you didn't get continuous reporting. You didn't say, now look, they're starting to move the rockets. Now they're here. In other words, there is still what I said from the very beginning. This is a classic example of conventional wisdom prevailing. What was the conventional wisdom? They don't have the capability. The second thing is they didn't have the sources. They had one report that wasn't time sensitive, and they didn't have follow-on reports from the 200 other people that knew things were happening. So I stand where I said before. This is a major human source failure. And I think they reckon, the Israelis recognize it, and they're going to fix it.
What is your view? Twice. What is your view of the reports by BBC, The Telegram, and the Financial Times about these 7 female tank commanders who reported on October 5th and 6th the extraordinary movement of human beings toward the border and the extraordinary number of drones that they saw in the air, and then their reports were summarily dismissed? Was this Israeli misogynism, or is there another reason to dismiss this?
Look, I don't know the answer to that question. I would suspect that there are tidbits that'll surface. You know, when you looked at Pearl Harbor, some guy out in the middle of the Atlantic got a note, and his boss killed the note. But that the Japanese were en route. So you might find things, but that's not a systemic failure. In other words, it's not like the institution sitting on a report and made a conscientious decision. So there may have been tips that were overlooked. I don't doubt that. This will all come out in the wash. But no matter how you cut it, that is not a human source. That's someone spotting a tank rolling down. I mean, observing one event, right? So that's not what I'm talking about, and that's not indicative of the root cause of the failure. That was reported would not have solved the fact that they did not have sufficient reporting.
What is the root cause of the failure? How did this happen?
They don't have the sources. They clearly didn't have human sources saying, I'm being tasked to move over here. Uncle Billy's going there. The fence. How many people do you think had to know about this to exact that type of punishment? Punishment is the wrong word, but attack on the Israelis. I mean, hundreds of people had to be witting of it at all levels. The Iranians had to know about it, in my view.
Right.
Where was all of the technical collection that we spend billions of dollars on? The Israelis are heavily invested, some of the best, because they understand their problem. Where's the intelligence? Where was the human intelligence? One spy, well placed. It looked like they had one. That 40-page report, they should have whined that guy as long as they could. And I mean that figurative, not literally.
Yeah.
Because he probably doesn't drink wine.
What do you think, either from your instinct, from public sources, or from your own sources, the CIA knew on October 6th?
I don't think they knew more than the Israelis. If they
Why
knew
do you-
more, they would have shared it.
Why-
I'm
why do you-
confident. I'm totally confident. If they had information, they would have shared it.
Does the CIA have assets on the ground in the Gaza?
That's a tricky question for me. But I would say the Jack Devine would be sort of surprised.
All right. Is Bibi Netanyahu a dead man walking, politically speaking? Maybe even in terms of his
Well,
personal
never count him
liberty.
out. Never count him out. Anybody who's watching him for years, but I think he's in a political pickle of no doubt. But someone has to replace him. You have to come up with a plan. This is the big issue, Judge. What I said this from the very beginning. If you ask me, I said they're going to have to use an iron hand. There's no soft landing in getting rid of Hamas. But when it's over, and if you can identify victory, and that, to me, that would be sufficient. You need to think about, now what? What is the plan? And in victory, there's opportunities for being magnanimous. So I think there's going to be a political struggle inside of Israel about what do we do now that we've got Hamas temporarily. In other words, once you defeat them and destroy it, doesn't mean it's the end of the day. New plants are growing. It's like when I used to fight counter narcotics. You take out a mafia don, next week you have a captain that steps in. So there has to be a lot of serious soul searching in Israel and its policy making about what is going to work to make a lasting peace. And the status quo, we're not going to return to where we were. Status quo, if to get a lasting peace, you got to come up with a new plan.
What is your view of Joe Biden's advocacy of a two-state solution? I don't think that's going to happen while Netanyahu's in office.
But I don't think the president has said that. But this is not a new idea. It's been around for a long time. I think it's gaining momentum. I don't know how you get lasting peace without an independent Palestinian state.
Now, is that Jack Devine speaking or the CIA speaking?
Oh, God, I never speak for CIA. They disagree with me. I have to send them love letters like the Washington Post article, the Wall Street Journal article.
I want to play.
This is me speaking, and it's based on, look, I don't think it's that hard to figure out that you can't go back. You just can't stay where you are. It's not a sustainable position. So
here's somebody who agrees with you. Back in 2006, you'll recognize him immediately.
His new book is called Palestine, Peace, Not Apartheid. And President Carter, why did you use the word apartheid in the book's title?
Well, let's look at the entire title, if you don't mind. The first word is Palestine, which involves the land that belongs to the Palestinians, not the Israelis. I didn't refer to Israel because there's no semblance of anything relating to apartheid within the nation of Israel. And I also emphasize the word not, that is peace and not apartheid. That's what I hope to accomplish with this book, is some move toward that goal. But there's no doubt that within the occupied territories, Palestinian land, that there is a horrendous example of apartheid. The occupation of Palestinian land, the confiscation of that land that doesn't belong to Israel, the building of settlements on it, the colonization of that land, and then the connection of those isolated but multiple settlements, more than 200 of them, with each other by highways on which Palestinians can't travel, and quite often where Palestinians cannot even cross. So the persecution of the Palestinians now under the occupying territories is under the occupation forces is one of the worst examples of human rights deprivation that I know.
Your thoughts, Jack?
Well, it's not the first time I've disagreed with President Carter. I think the use of the language was quite provocative. But we're also talking about what just happened. You're talking about a bloodbath and massacre. It's hard to justify that under any circumstances. So no, I didn't agree with any of that. So you can suggest, as I am, that maybe a Palestine state is the answer. You don't have to agree with everything that Jimmy's saying.
Here's another.
Take me off the list of people that agree. There are a few things. There are a lot of things I disagree. For example, the Iranian policy with them. But there are some things that he made a huge contribution in the humanitarian area. But let's leave that aside.
Here's another person that you might agree with, and this is the first time I have heard him speak publicly about this. It's in Italian, so I will read cut number 3, Chris. So I will read the subtitles.
Una de
This morning, I
israeliani
received 2
che hanno
delegations, one of Israelis who have
parenti
relatives held hostage in the Gaza Strip,
come
and
ostaggi
another of Palestinians who have
in
relatives
Gaza
imprisoned in
e
Israel.
un'altra di
Suffered
palestinesi
so much.
che hanno dei
I
parenti
heard how both
prigionieri
sides are
in
suffering.
Israele. Loro soffrono tanto e ho sentito come soffrono ambedue. Le guerre fanno con
This
questo,
is what wars
ma
do.
qui siamo andati
Here we have
oltre le guerre.
done wars.
Questo
This
non
is
è
not
guerra già,
war, this is
questo è
terrorism.
terrorismo. Per favore andiamo avanti per la pace. Pregate per la pace. Pregate tanto per la pace.
Now, for those who are
Well-
listening rather than watching, that was Pope Francis. The Israelis condemned the statement that he made. What do you think?
So I would say, first of all, his Italian is impeccable. And he's obviously a fluent Spanish speaker. I lived there in Italy and speak Spanish and Italian, so that was impeccable. But he wasn't speaking, and you will appreciate it, ex cathedra. Judge, you know what ex cathedra is,
Of course
right?
not. He was making a political statement, but what he was
It's
saying
making a
was
political
making
statement.
sense.
So he is a man of peace, and it's no war is justifiable. Although he did correct that at one point, that there is such a thing as a justified war during his tenure. So I think he's speaking from the heart about peace and humanity. But if we go back to the arguments of a just war, which I have pontificated on occasion here, is, they were attacked. The Israelis were attacked. You're at war. When is a just war? When you've tried everything else, you have to keep the civilian losses down. You have to have prospect. All of that, but part of the theology of it is you need to minimize civilian losses, and that's what he's saying. We're preaching to the Israelis.
Netanyahu is not minimizing.
I've got to finish this one. The Israelis understand that. They understand they have to keep civilians down. They're not political novices here.
Well,
So
they don't practice it.
We're preaching to the choir on this. They know this. We're bringing souls to Newcastle.
They dropped 6 2,000-pound bombs on a refugee camp to kill one Hamas leader, which they succeeded in doing, to kill another 175 people. That is hardly minimizing civilian casualties, Jack.
Do you think that was done on purpose?
Yes.
I do not.
How could you possibly drop 6 2,000-pound bombs not on purpose?
Who do you think they were dropping them on? Who do you think they think they were dropping them on?
I don't know what they think. I know
How
what
about
they
Hamas?
did,
Let me
which
give
is
you a
to
clue.
kill
How about
innocent human
Hamas?
beings.
That they thought it was a Hamas group, right?
Well, it was
Look,
a
I'm not gonna,
refugee
I don't have
camp.
no
They know
idea.
exactly
I
where
have no idea how the war planning was done. I have no idea why they pulled it.
Do you
But
think
if the
that
theory is that, they're just going after civilians, then I don't think they understand the Israeli mentality at this point, that they understand the worldview now. They're trying to get this done. We bombed Dresden. We bombed Nagasaki.
I know what we
When
did
you
in
get
Dresden
war,
was horrible.
but I'm saying that today there's a different standard, and everyone is mindful of that standard. So I don't think they're willy-nilly. The one that's willy-nilly is your friend Putin, who has, he has no concern about what he's bombing. There's a place you should be looking at. I think the Israelis. Okay, well, look, Judge, we have disagreed before,
Right.
and we'll disagree again.
We disagree. We disagree
spirit.
agreeably. But what you just said about Putin, I have to push back because, again, the New York Times, and you may discount it. I know the Wall Street Journal is more to your liking than the New York Times, but
They
but
like
the
me
New York
better.
Times,
They like me better. The New York Times is a different
right?
story.
The New York
They
Times.
like you. The New York Times likes you. The Wall Street Journal likes me.
It's the first I've ever heard the New York Times likes me, but it's
That
nice
was a
to
joke, Judge. Don't take it too seriously.
The New York Times reports that more women and children have been killed by the Israelis in 8 weeks than have been killed by the Russians in Ukraine in 18 months. Can you answer that?
Look, I mean, how do I deal with, where are they getting the numbers? No one knows the numbers. I mean, it's like, what you're looking at is Putin is doing it deliberately. This is the issue. And I believe the Israelis are doing the best they can to minimize it. I don't think he is. I think part of his is just playing out fear. Just kill as many of them as you can.
What is
And I
the
don't think
evidence
that's where
that the Israelis are trying to minimize civilian
I
casualties?
do. I think they are. I'm
What
sorry.
about, why do you believe that? What is the evidence for it?
Because I think they recognize, first of all, their biggest ally is telling them to do that, and they are conscious of that. The NATO is telling them that. The world opinion is telling them to do that, and their own population is telling them to do that. So the minimizing it is, I mean, listen, war is ugly. You go to war to make peace. I mean, you know, no one in a right mind, and that includes Putin, right? It starts a war, and knowing full well that you're going to have innocent people killed over some theoretical view in your mind of an expanded Russia. The Israelis were attacked. The Ukrainians were sitting peacefully in their country when Mother Russia attacked them. So there is not a similarity here in either the nature of the war or the causes of the war.
Jack Devine, always a pleasure, my dear friend. Thank you
To
very
be
much.
continued.
Yeah, absolutely, to be continued at your convenience. You're always welcome here. Thanks very much
Thank you.
for your time.
Have a good holiday.
You as well. Merry Christmas, my dear friend, although we might see each other before Christmas.
Well, hopefully.
Our regulars will be back next week. Looking forward to it. Have a great weekend, everyone. Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.